terms reads for. So when data is collected from beginning to end by any individual or researcher or any institution for the first time basis, then such data is called a primary data. It is in other words, we can also call it as a first hand data or the original data. So basically it requires a plenty of money, the funds on collecting such data, and at the same time the manpower is also required. That means the more and more people are also needed to collect the primary data in any research study for any research project. When it comes to the secondary data is a data which has already been collected by an institution, by a researcher, and the people and the researcher or institution or the associated people, they generate a new information from the old data, from the previous data, which has been already collected by different researchers in their respective studies, and that is actually called secondary data. In other words, we can call it a second hand information which is used by the researcher to gather a new information, you can say, from the previous studies to include in his or her new study. So let's take an example to understand the secondary data. So if you have already a data about the population of India, then you can easily find out that what is the exact percentage of the illiterate people, what was the exact percentage of the illiterate people. Then accordingly, you can collect that data from the population of in filling up the questionnaires or just giving up the responses to the researchers. That is the biggest difficulty while collecting the primary data. But in case of the secondary data, there is no difficulty because data is already available and the researcher has to use for this study. The sources for which the primary data is collected could be the surveys, it could be the experiments, it could be the observations, it could be the personal interviews or mailed, you can say questionnaires or telephonic interviews. That could be the sources that where the researcher could use and collect the primary data. But when we talk about the secondary data, the sources from which the secondary data is to be collected are websites, are the government publications, the journals, the articles, the research papers, any sort of online web portals of the various organizations where the data is also being published. Let's take a case of the cybercrime data that is already available on the cybercrime websites of the respective years. So if any researcher would like to study on the cybercrime in India, so definitely they can use the data which is available on their website, being as a secondary data to use in their own study. And the last one is that in case of the primary data, it's always specific to the researcher need. But the data which was collected by many researchers may not be specific to the researcher needs. Because sometimes the data that you use for your study, whether you have to decide whether it could be specific or not, but mainly the secondary data, it doesn't necessarily, it would be very specific to the researcher need as compared to the primary data. Now we can come up to the next section, which is one of the most important part, that is the methods of collecting the primary data. So the first one, the first method or the first one of collecting the primary data is observation. So in simple sense, observation means it's collecting, it is a process of collecting the data by watching, by observing, recording the behavior, events, and conditions which are naturally occur nearby surroundings. In fact, in this particular method, the observer systematically watches and notes the specific aspects of the respondent or the subject behavior or any sort of environment, either covertly or overtly. So this is something that one of the methods where we need to assess by observing, and accordingly we could record the behavior events or any sort of conditions that is naturally happening near us. That is called observation. But as every method has advantages and disadvantages, and what would be the suitability to use such method? So the first one is advantages. It's provide a real-time data, and in fact, the data which the researcher could collect, it could be the original one, and it's called an authentic data without dependent on the self-reported information or dependent on the secondary data. When we talk about the disadvantages of this method, observer can, of course, can also observer errors or base can also influences the results of the study, and such base, the presence of such bases and errors, it might affect the subject or the respondent behavior or any event or any conditions, etc. Now we can come up to the suitability to use this method when a particular researcher is studying with different sort of products in their natural settings or the real setting. This method could be very much suitable when you're monitoring the behavior of the animals, of the you can see the wildlife areas or surroundings. You can also use this method when you are actually assessing the dynamics, the changing dynamics in the classroom. This method could be easily used when a particular researcher is studying any interactions with the product, with the you can say people that this method could be used when there is a sample of the juices that would be you can see circulated in the nearby you can see shopping complex or outside the malls in a stall. When there is a testing of the samples of the juices, when new product or new varieties of the juices come out in the market, and before it launch into the market, such product is to be tested by the people and just check out the behavior, the reactions or actions of while tasting the new product. Then also the observation method, in that case the observation method could also be used. The next one is the questionnaires. So questionnaire is also the one of the method of collecting the primary data. So it's all about asking a set of questions. It could be the structured questions or it could be the unstructured question. It could be asked either online or a paper or the face-to-face interaction. So in this particular method, the investors prepare a set of the questionnaires to collect information or the meaningful information through the questionnaires and the schedule. So while keeping in mind the main objective of the study, the investigator or the researcher could collect the data through the questionnaires in the mainly two forms. So it could be the mailed questionnaires, it could be a physical questionnaires. So it could be any two ways the researcher could adopt while collecting the primary data informed by the use of this method. But as every method had advantage and disadvantage, so of course this method is also facing an advantages and disadvantages as well. So when we talk about the advantages of this method, it could reach to a large audience or a wider audience very quickly. And of course, it is one of the method which called a cost-effective method, where the cost would be very less. When we talk about the disadvantages, it responses could be based, could be inaccurate, and we even the researcher could actually faces a lower response rate in this particular method. The suitable case, that what would be the suitability of this method when a particular researcher is assessing the customer's perception, customer satisfaction, customers' attitudes, customers attributes. They can use this method, and accordingly when a particular researcher is doing the researches in the markets to assess the market trends of a product, or with market performances or market performance of a new product which is launched in a particular country or in a particular region by a you can say company. When a particular researchers do a research of its new product by a new company in the specific market or in a specific area, this method can also be used, because after all, while filling up the questionnaires, they will get the feedback from the customers. So if any modification is actually required, then definitely they could accordingly revise their product and then launch in the market. So this is something that this method is the most appropriate, because the researchers will get the more insights of the particular problem of a particular issue or a concern that actually exists, and accordingly could resolve within a prescribed time. Now, the third method is the mailing questionnaire method. So, as I told, the questionnaire could be applied into two ways. It could be the mail questionnaires, or it could be the face-to-face questionnaire. So, the third method is related to the questionnaire only. That is called the mailing questionnaire method. This method is all about to mail the questionnaires to all the respondents, which are actually including in the study to collect the primary data. The investigators also attach a letter with the questionnaire that what was the main purpose of doing this research or doing this study, which is very important to get to know to the respondent and why this questionnaire is needed to fill up and why this research is actually needed to do in this specific target audience. So this is something, a method which could be used because it also involves the time, it also saves the time, energy, and money as well. The next one is the telephonic interview. So telephonic interview is all about another when it is an initial job interview process over the phone, which are used by the employers to screen the candidates and just narrow down the applicants in person interviews. So when we talk about the research, so research is all about that how you get the exact specific information through the set of questions which will be asked over the telephone to the respondents to whom you are willing to include or who are actually being as a target audience for your study. So accordingly, you can use this method and you can say plan accordingly set of questions and ask from the informants, or you can say the respondents over the phone, and accordingly you will get the meaningful information, and that information will be included or will be concluded in your study. So this is something that you can call, you can speak clearly, the sound would be very energetic, you can listen, you can receive the responses. But one of the main disadvantages that that the respondents wouldn't be pick the call and they don't answers the questions. Instead of they just say this pass the question. So instead of saying this, it could be good for them to answer, but this is also the one of the advantage that they will get a low response rate over the phone as well. Now, this is one of the most important part that there are three main methods: the personal interview with the questionnaires, the mailed questionnaires, and the telephonic interview. We have an advantages and disadvantages as well. So when we talk about the personal interview with questionnaires, so it is one of the most flexible method of collecting the primary data. So where the identity of the respondents is almost known, because after all it's a face-to-face interaction, so we get to know that who are actually coming for an interview and we have a face-to-face discussion. No response is very low, because after all when you have a face-to-face discussion, the response rate is quite high as compared to the mail and telephonic interviews. Supervision and control is absolutely possible when it comes to the having an interview personally. Let's talk about the male cautionary advantages. So it's all about the wider audience coverage at the you can say same cost at the low cost, because after all there is no staff required to you can say to collect the data, primary data using this method. Cost per questioner is relatively low as compared to the personal interview, and of course there is no chances of any basis of interviewers because after all it is a made the set of questions to be made to the respondents, and accordingly we could receive a response directly from the respondents through emails. So respondents can answer directly through emails, they can fill up the Google Docs and accordingly they could answer, and this is something which could be very useful now in today projects, in today research, while the researchers preparing a research reports or any specific topic related to marketing, related to management or journal management, is related to any sort of logistic and operations related research topics. So this is something where it saves the cost, it saves the you can see the funds as well, and accordingly it would be work for your work, or you can say work effectively for your research. But when we talk about the telephonic interviews, we have also having advantages of this method. It is also termed as a wider and more representative coverage possible at the same cost. So there is no field work is required that the staff has to go some of the areas and collect the data from the targeted respondents. No. In this particular method, there is no field work or any staff is required. The cost of response rate is very low because we're not necessarily, as I already told, that in the fourth method of collecting the primary data, the response rate is very low. We are not sure that we did the 100 telephonic interviews and every and 100 to 100 respondent would answer directly. No, we cannot see that. And that's why the cost of response is very low. Next one is a quick way of obtaining data. Of course, it is a very quicker method of collecting the primary data as well. Well, as we have already talked about we have about the advantages of these three methods. Now we can come up to the disadvantages. So when we talk about the personal interview with questionnaires, disadvantages, it is one of the most expensive. As when we talk about collecting the primary data, it's expensive because it needs time, it needs staff, it needs or manpower, it needs funds as well. And then this consider these three main aspects, it is the most expensive method of collecting the primary data. When we talk about, of course, supervision is actually necessary. In fact, the more supervision is required in personal interview, that is also the one of the disadvantage of it. Because when we talk about the concentrate supervision, it requires more and more funds. So when we talk about the funds become more expensive, that's why it is one of the main disadvantage of this method. As the chances of basis is almost exist in on part of the investigators, which will be present in their responses. When we talk about the mailed questionnaire disadvantage, the high degree of non-response. The non-response rate is quite high or very high when it talks about the mailed questionnaires. Questions which require, you can see, probing cannot be asked. In fact, the questions may facing any issues or facing any language issue may not be able to ask through the mails because the respondents couldn't be able to understand the language, and it may be a possible they couldn't be response. And the next disadvantage is slowest of all the methods of data collection. It's a very slow process. You cannot expect that if you mail today, you will get all the emails back on the same day. It could be week, it could be month. Some mails could come in the week, some mails comes into the respondents in the month. So that's why it is a very slow process of using such method because the expectation rate is very low. Next is assumes that the respondents is educated. Assumptions is also the one of the cause of the disadvantages because the researchers is always assume the respondents is educated. They can easily understand the language or the English, we could say. Somehow it could not be understand, it could not respond what we expected or what we have assumed. So that's why it is also the one of the disadvantage. Next one is the telephonic interview. Non-telephonic honors may not be, you can say, it cannot be reached because somehow the telephone numbers are not working. The researchers may not be able to reach to the right candidate on this particular method. Interview period is short. We have to complete the interview within a minute and may not be necessary to get the exact answer, all the answers of the questionnaires. And in fact, the researchers cannot be able to ask the set of question which is designed by him or cannot be asked over the phone. complete set of questions. So this is something, the one of the disadvantage, the period of the telephonic interview is short. Next one is the questions which require probing cannot be asked. The question which is actually facing a language barrier, or while asking such question, the next respondent wouldn't be able to understand. So sometimes it may not be asked, which is also important to ask, but cannot be asked due to language barrier. So this is something, a disadvantage of the telephonic interview. So these are the major, this is a very simplest chart of the advantages or disadvantages of the methods of collecting the primary data. Now we can talk about the preferred data collection methods. So there are three main: personal interview, mail questionnaires, telephonic interview. So these are the main aspect, the funds, time, and type of data. So when we talk about the personal interview, the personal interview and mail questionnaires, so definitely in this particular scenario, it is restricted. The funds, time, and type of data would be a few items. So mail interview and personal interview could be preferred rather than telephonic interview. When there is a funds are restricted, time is also restricted, and much more information is available, then of course the mail questionnaire and telephonic interview is more preferred. When the funds are restricted, ample time is available, few items data has to be accessed, then of course the personal interview is actually preferred. When the funds are restricted, time is ample, very much information is required, then of course you can say telephonic interview is more preferred. Apple funds are Apple, time is restricted, few items are the data which is to be consist of the few items, then the mail questionnaire is very well enough or preferred. When the funds are Apple, time is restricted, and type of data is much information is already you can say required, then the mail and telephone is preferred. Then and again the Apple is Apple funds, Apple time, few items, then the mail questionnaire is preferred. Same for the Apple funds and Apple time, much information, the mail and telephonic interviews will be more preferred. So this is something that accordingly we use the type of the methods in case of primary data. Now the next part is how you design the questionnaire. So the first one is we have to plan and prepare accordingly. We have to define the goals. We need to, the researcher clearly establish what sort of information he or she need to collect, what sort of questions of the, you can say, what sort of question the researcher has to survey, which mainly aims to answer the goals, which to answer the questions according to fulfill that goals. Next one is identify the target audience. It is very important to determine the specific group of people a particular researcher want to survey, considering their languages, their English comprehension, the knowledge of the topic. Next one is then accordingly choose the survey method, decide how you reach your target respondents, like online, in person, over the phone. And this is something the planning and the preparation stage or phase of designing the questionnaire. Let's talk about the next phase, that is the question design phase. So we have to adopt a set of instructions while preparing the set of questions. So the first one is use clear and simple language. So avoid the technical terms, complex terms, double negative terms, to ensure that everyone should understand the questions. Next one is ask one idea at a time. It is very important for the researcher to phrase the question to address a single topic rather than involve into multiple topics in the question, and try to avoid confusion and ensure that the accurate answers could be received by the respondents. Use appropriate question types. Select from the open-ended questions for free-form answers. So it is very important the particular researcher has to adopt the closed-ended question or open-ended question. So it's all about to adopt a structured questionnaires where the close-ended questions will be adopted. The researchers could freely answer, choosing the best response, and it could be very meaningful and useful for the study. Next one is avoid base. So phrase questions positively avoid the negativity in the statement, so that they should encourage more. You can say a biased responses or truthful responses. Next one is be considerate of respondents. Ask about the information respondents, which should be realistic, recall, you can say whenever is needed, and of course should meet and provide with a suitable time frame, and within this time 15 minutes or 20 minutes this questionnaire has to fill by the respondents, and accordingly the responses will be recorded within that particular time. The next stage is structuring and the formatting. So this is that we should follow a logical flow. We should arrange the questions in a logical and the meaningful order, so that the respondents could understand, and the survey could also run smoothly. Next one is concise length. Keep the questionnaire as short as possible in order to maintain the respondent engagement and prevent to being avoid to answer such questions. Next one is clear instruction. It is very important to provide a clear, a simple or easy instruction to understand for each section of the question. Next phase is testing and refinement. So here we just test the pre-test. We also, in other words, we can also talk about the pilot test or the pilot study. The researcher administers the set of the questionnaires to a small group of people or of your target audience to identify whether there is issue in any of the questions, and it reveals either clarity, understanding, a flow of the topic in which could be revealed in the question. So this is called the pilot study. We need to test this aspects through distributing the questionnaires to a small group of people, so that we could gather the more and more accurate responses in order to assess that whether is there any concern or issues in the questionnaires or not. So this is called a pre-test, which is one of the important part of the questionnaire. So once you design the questionnaires, when you design a set of questions, you need to check with a group of persons and what they respond, whether you get a meaningful conclusion or not. If not, and then definitely you have to revisit your questionnaires and accordingly revise your questionnaires, and then you can begin again. So as once you get the clarity check, once you get the understanding check, once you get the flow check on the research topic, so it could be get through the feedback. So collect the feedback on the questions, on the wordings, on the overall experience of the respondents, and if there is any issues and concern on the set of the question, the particular researcher could make a necessary adjustments to the questionnaires according to the feedback received during the pre-test. So pre-test is very much essential for the questionnaires. Before you proceed further stages, it is important to do a pre-test of your questionnaire, so you get to know whether the questions are clear by the respondents, the question is able to understand by the respondent, whether the question is actually stuck with the research topic or not. So this is something the particular respondents could able to give their feedback on this aspect, and then the particular researcher could revise the questionnaire wherever is required. And the last is introduction and conclusion. So we just provide the context and we give a brief introduction that what was the exact purpose of the questionnaire, what is its importance to the organization, why the organization is conducting conducting the study while using this method. Next one is assure confidentiality. So the major focus that the of the particular you can say of this method is the responses will be treated confidentially and it could be reported you can say with lot of secrecy. Next one is outline the process. So that it refers to inform the respondents on how long it will take to complete the you can say questionnaires process and what step is to be needed to take this process to an ending stage. Next one is the provide the contact information. It offers the contact details for any of the questions, concerns the respondents may have. So this is a sample of the customer questionnaire. So this is how the researcher could conduct the questionnaires and they just accordingly conduct their study based on the research topic. So as it is a topic which is get to assess the experiences with the company products and services, and this is how the set of questions has been designed to get to know about their experiences with the products, with the services. So with the products, you will see that how you learn about our products. When we talk about the services, how our product or service find the most valuable to you. So these are the various options are available, whether you are satisfied, what was the overall experiences, or would you recommend our products and services to your relatives or friends or family members. So this is something you can see the multiple choice portion has been made. So when we talk about the very dissatisfied, neutral, these are called Likert scales. So Likert scales are the scales where set of questions and the responses termed as a multidimensional. So this is something that we come up to learn that how the Likert scale questionnaires to be made up and how the Likert scale is to be used in the questionnaires or in a set of the questions. So this is how we could conclude questionnaires to get to know about any of the experiences, your satisfaction, etc. So why pretest is necessary? It's the one of the few reasons to identify the problems. We just get to the researcher should get to know the issues with the questioning part or the clarity of the instruction, the overall format of the questionnaire, whether it looks like structured or it looks like unstructured or informal question is being included. Next one is it assesses the validity. It always checks if the questions are suitable or relevant for the research aims or whether these questions are actually matched with the research topic or considering the main objectives of the studies or what they exactly intend to measure you can say in this particular questionnaire, which could be easily get to know once we assess the validity of the questionnaires. Next one is improve the clarity and flow. It also helps to ensure that the respondents interpret the questions as they intended, and it actually once the expectations are more likely what they expected from the questions. So that means a more reliable data would be received by the respondents. Next one is it evaluates the time and effort. It also determines the actual time needed so that they could complete the questionnaire. They could also helps to manage the respondent burden because this is a prescribed time within 15 to 20 minutes and you have to complete the questionnaire form within this prescribed time. So this is something which is donate, which reveals that this is the time period and within a prescribed time period, a particular respondent could easily finish the questionnaires. And the last one is refine the data collection. If any of the issues and concern could found, then of course it would be essential to revise. It could ensure that the data collection tool is efficient and effective for a systematic data gathering. Now we can talk about the key aspects of primary data editing. So once you get the feedback from the customers or feedback from the respondent, it is very important whenever there is required to edit the primary data, researcher and editors should always considers the several aspects of primary data editing in order to maintain the data quality. There are four main aspects. The first one is completeness. A particular researcher has to check that every question has been answered and there is no significant omissions or errors. Next is accuracy. It's important to verify that the data are recorded which should be truthful and correct. Next one is consistency. It should ensure that different answers within the same data set do not contradict to each other. So once you get the responses, once you start checking the consistency, so you need to check that different answers within the same data that do not contradict each other. Next one is uniformity or the homogeneity. So it always makes sure that the data is collected and recorded in the same format as designed by the researcher, in the same style as designed by the researcher, especially in the large surveys where the multiple investigators are being involved. Now we can come up to the next important part, that is the effective interview techniques. So for an interview, it is very important for the candidate to review, for the interviewer to review the candidate resume and covering letter and create a list of prepared and open-ended questions. Set a positive note. So always maintain a positive body language, make an eye contact, establish a good rapport to create you can say conversational, confrontational, and you can say healthy atmosphere. Ask effective questions. So for an interview, it is important that they should ask the effective questions. So ask the open-ended questions to encourage the detailed responses. You can also ask the follow-up questions to get more deeper insight about the candidate experiences, and accordingly we could review the profile or review the candidate. Use the structured techniques, so that the interviewer could also use the structured interviews techniques to get to know their behavior using the STAR method, like situation, task, action, and result, so that they could also access the past performances of the candidates. Listen actively. Interviewer should need to pay attention what the interviewee is actually responding or answering the question, what the signal they are trying to say. The interviewer need to understand through their non-verbal cues, ask for the clarification if needed. Be efficient, keep the interview focused and adhere to the allocated time frame. Close professionally, explain the next step in the recruitment process clearly to the interviewee. Follow up, send a personalized thank you note and reiterating your interest in the candidate and a summary of their key qualifications. Now we come up to for the candidates and what sort of interview techniques the candidate has to adopt. The first one is research. The candidate has to research about the company in which they are going for an interview and the specific position they need to understand and how your skills could align with that vacancy or with that post you are willing to apply for. Next one is practice answers. You should prepare your responses to the common interview questions, particularly those about your experiences and skills. Use the STAR method. You can use this method to assess the situation, what would be the task, what sort of actions you would like to take, and what could be the outcome. So that this method could be used to better understand about the candidate performances and you can explain with the relevant examples as well. Next one is demonstrate the positive body language, maintain the eye contact, do not stare here and there, be in open posture and use confident non-verbal cues. Ask questions, prepare an insightful questions about the role, company to show your enthusiasm that you are more interested to work in this company. Be prepared for follow-up. You can anticipate the follow-up questions. If you have any additional examples of your skills and experience, should be ready in your hands. Send a thank you note, send a personalized email or letter to express your gratitude, to reiterate your qualification. Dress appropriately, research the company dress code, and choose an outfit that makes you feel confident with your dress sense. So these are the techniques of an interview the candidate has to adopt before they're going for an interview for in a company. Now we can come up to the collection. What are the collection collection of sources of secondary data? There are various publications of central, state, and local government like Statistical Abstract, Indian Annual Monthly Abstract of Statistics, which is published by the Central Statistical Organization, Indian Agricultural Statistics Annual Basis. It was published by the Food and Agriculture, Ministry of Food and Agriculture. Index number of wholesale prices in India is published by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Reserve Bank of India Bulletin, its monthly basis published by the Reserve Bank of India. So these are the publication which is a sources of the secondary data which is being published by the central, state and local governments. There are also various publications of foreign governments or international bodies like UNO, FAU, WHO, UNESCO, ILO, Statistical Yearbook, which is being published by the Statistical Office of the United Nations. There are also a yearbook of the labor statistics provided by the ILO Geneva. There are secondary data provided by such publications are authentic, and along with other things, one must especially be careful about the units in respect of the currency's weight, which is depends or differ from country to country. Next is Journal of Trade, Commerce, Economics and Engineering. So there are trade organizations, their respective specialization. Chambers of Commerce provide secondary data in respect of some important items. Some example of such publications are Annual Report of the Chief Inspector of Mines in India. So there are plenty of global reports are available which has been issued by in the journals of trade, commerce and economics. And of course, it could be such reports, annual reports will be issued annually by the Office of the Chief Inspector of Mine, Denver. Indian Textile Bulletin, which was issued monthly by the Textile Commissioner of Bombay. The other sources of secondary data could be books, magazines, and newspapers, reports prepared by the various institutions or universities, historical document diaries, letters, unpublished biographies, and audiographies. So you can also see the biographies, documentaries, autobiographies on the Discovery channels in the OTT platforms like Netflix or the Amazon Video, Prime Video. Now we can talk about the key aspect of scrutinize of the secondary data. Scrutinize is all about a careful examination, you can say, of the issues or the concern to get a deep insight into a topic. So that's why it is the few aspect is very important to scrutinize of the secondary data. So first one is suitability for purpose. We need to know that whether the data or information is exactly addressed to the specific research objective or questions or not. Does any geographical area or demographic area or reasons you are interested in, or does this objectives cover such areas? Definitions could be, are the units of measurements or terms are used are consistent with your research needs or not. This is something a suitability, then what sort of suitability for your aim of the objectives, aims and objectives of the study, which is actually relevant or not. This is something the researchers could scrutinize of the secondary data, which is already being collected by the researchers. Reliability and accuracy. It is very important that the secondary data is actually reliable and accurate. We need to find out the source credibility, who collected the data, where they are unbased or credible, what methodology they were used to collect the data. Was it clearly mentioned in its paper? Accuracy of feedback. Were there checks on the accuracy data collection process, whether they have adopted an accurate data collection process or not? So this is something, a credibility and accuracy could be adopted by the researcher. Adequacy of data, it becomes a coverage. Is the data complete enough to fulfill your research requirements? Timely, whether it's a time enough or up to date data for the with showing up a current trends. So this is something in adequacy of data would be required. And the last one is the consistency and comparability. So internal consistency is the data internally consistent. External consistency is that the data align with the reputed sources on the same topic or not. Homogeneous conditions, whether the conditions under which the data was collected the same across different time periods of sources. So whether the different sources according to the different time period has been used for the data collection or not. This is something we need to check the consistency and the comparability of the data collections in the previous studies where the secondary data has been used. Now we can come up to the major concepts: beliefs, attitude, and attributes. Beliefs. So, belief is all about the cognitive judgment or the convention whether something is real or true or may not be true, whether it is based on the logic or fact. They serve many mental models, cognitive behavior theories, a frame of references through which we can interpret the world. For example, believing that all people are inherently good, believing that the hard work leads to success, believing in the importance of democracy. So it's all about our cognitive internal judgment, the conviction whether something is real or true, whether it's related to any fact or logic. This is all about beliefs. Next one is attitude. So attitude is all about the predisposition to respond in a consistent, favorable or unfavorable way towards a person, object, and idea. It's all about your response. It's all about your behavior, whether it could be favorable, it could be unfavorable towards a person, object, and idea. They are actually evaluated. They are evaluated immediately, combining what the others believe or what we believe about something, attributes, and how we feel about it. A positive attitude towards a brand of coffee because you believe it has a rich flavor or you have a good experience drinking it. It's all about belief. That a positive attitude is all about your positive belief. A negative attitude is all about your negative belief. If you and if you're showing any negative attitude because you are not believing what is exactly real in it. So this is something, a negative attitude comes out from you and it shows in your behavior. So this is something, a negative attitude towards public speaking because you believe it is a stressful experience for and you have a bad experiences doing it. So this is, and that reflects in your attitude, which shows negativity. So these are called attitudes. That how you respond positively or negatively towards anything. Next is attributes. Attributes are the observable and the measurable characteristics or quality of a person, object, or idea. So if we're talking about the political experiences in public office, we always give an option. It would be good, bad, excellent, very, very bad, or bad. So this is something we could examine, and when we observable or measure the characteristics or qualities of an individual object and idea, that becomes attributes. They are descriptive in nature and can be objectively identified as well. A car fuel efficiency 50 miles per gallon. a political experience in public office, a company reputation for customer services as well. Now we can come up to the types of scale. The first one is nominal scale. It is a very simple scale. It's all about the various alternative categories that we design for a set of facts or choices which are usually exclusive or the mutually exclusive. Like for example, what is your gender? What is your annual income or a monthly annual income? And we have a set of options. There are also another set of questions, like a survey has been conducted in a retail store, and we have shown a fact in the form of the question, and we are just giving a multiple alternative categories that what would be your answer. So how do you stock items at present? By product category, by centralized store, by department wise or single warehouse. These are called categories. We have shown the fact in the form of the question, and we have categorized the responses. Daily turnover of consumer is between this 100 to 200, 200 to 300 above. These are the categories we have decided. And when we assign any fact to a various alternative categories, that actually call a nominal scale. Now we can come up to the ordinal scale. Ordinal scale is one of the simplest attitude measuring scale which is used in the marketing research. It is a more powerful than the nominal scale because the number process is always being done in a ranking order. So the ranking of the certain product attributes or benefit is very important in this particular scale. We have to rank any product, we have to rank any person between 1 to 5, 1 to 7 on their importance. So as we can talk about the example that rank the following attributes 1 to 5 on the importance of a microwave oven, company name, function, price, comfort, and design. We can also take another example. If there are 4 different type of fertilizers and they have ordered on the basis of the quality, grade A, grade B, grade C, D, and again in the ordinal scale. Because after all, we are just ranking the order of any product attributes, of any product benefits, or anything which is used in the marketing research. And the last one is interval scale. The distance between the various categories, whether it would be nominal and ordinal, are equal, are same. That exactly called the interval scale. Interval scale are also known as the rating scales. An interval scale has an arbitrary 0 point, which further numbers are placed at an equal intervals. One of the good examples is thermometer, which is already mentioned in every book. But there are a few examples which also been mentioned, like temperature, Celsius, and Fahrenheit, IQ, intelligence, you can say scores, credit scores are also being comes under interval scale. Let's take an example. The difference between the 10 degrees Celsius and 20 degrees Celsius is the same as the difference between the 30 degrees Celsius and 40 degrees Celsius. So the difference between the two values of degrees are actually same. That is 10 degrees Celsius. So this is also the another Goodman scale which is used to measure the attitude. So this is a scale which is a cumulative scales which measures the respondent attitudes or behavior. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening this lecture. I will come up with a more and more interesting and relevant topic in the upcoming session, which is more and more important for your examinations. So till time, thank you and namaste to all.